You know, they say you can feel it in your bones when a storm is coming. At 82, I feel a lot of things in my bones, most of them unpleasant. Ache, mostly. A deep, resonant thrum of arthritis that sings a different tune, depending on the humidity. But this was a different feeling altogether. It was a prickle on the back of my neck, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of my own home, a quiet wrongness that had been settling in 4 weeks. It wasn't a weather storm, it was a human one, and its name was Jamie. Jamie, my youngest grandchild, 24 years old, all sharp angles and nervous energy, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Had always been a good kid, a bit quiet, maybe a little too enamored with his screens, but he had a good heart, or at least I thought he did. Had started coming around more about 3 months ago, said he wanted to connect, to hear my stories before they were gone. Flattering, for about a week. Then the questions started. It began innocently enough. Hey, Gramps, what was the name of your first dog? What street did you grow up on? Anyway, Mom said you were in the army. What was your serial number? That's so cool. I'd answer, of course. Why wouldn't I? I'm a vault of useless information, a living, breathing archive of a world that's mostly gone. I told him about Rex, the mangy terrier who thought he was a lion. I told him about Elm Street, back when the elms were still standing before the blight got them. I even dug out my old dog tags from a dusty box in the closet, let him hold the cold, stamped metal in his hands. 5, 6, 7, 8, 4 to 9. He didn't just listen, he absorbed. And he always had his phone out, thumbs tapping away, just making notes. Gramps, he'd say with that thin smile. Don't want to forget any of this. I believed him. I'm an old fool, but I'm not a complete idiot. The belief started to curdle about the time he asked about my mother's maiden name. We were sitting on the porch, watching the evening light bleed into the trees at the edge of my property. The cicadas were soaring away, a sound that always makes me feel peaceful. Or it used to. So, Nana Eleanor, he began, sipping the iced tea he'd made. Her family, they were from Ireland, right? County Cork, I said, rocking slowly in my chair. She came over on the boat when she was 5, terrified of water ever after. Wouldn't even fill the bathtub more than halfway. He chuckled, but it was hollow, a perfunctory sound. Right, right. And her name, before she married Grandpa Frank, was O'Sullivan, wasn't it? I stopped rocking. Eleanor's maiden name was Brennan. Frank O'Sullivan was my father. A simple, common enough mistake a grandkid might make. But Jamie had a memory like a steel trap. He remembered the name of my basic training commanding officer from a story he'd told him once, 5 years ago. He remembered the model of my first car, a 1963 Ford Falcon that was more rust than metal. He didn't make mistakes like that. I looked at him, really looked. He was trying too hard to seem casual. His gaze fixed a little too intently on the distant trees. The pulse in his neck was beating a rapid, tiny rhythm against his skin. O'Sullivan, I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the humid air. Yes, that's right. Maeve O'Sullivan. The lie was smooth and heavy, like a stone he'd picked up from the riverbed. Maeve was my father's sister, a woman Jamie had never met and had certainly never asked about. I saw his shoulders drop 1/4 of an inch, a release of tension. His thumbs moved under the table, out of my sight. Maeve, pretty name, he murmured. That it is, I said, and started rocking again. The peaceful feeling was gone, replaced by a cold, sinking dread in the pit of my stomach. He was fishing, and had just caught a whopper of a lie. Why? The oldest reason in the book. Money. I don't flaunt it. I live in the same modest 3-bedroom house I bought with my late wife, Clara, 50 years ago. I drive a 10-year-old sedan. I wear flannel shirts until they're threadbare. But Jamie knew. The whole family knew. On some level, Clara had inherited a decent sum from her parents, and we'd been careful, invested wisely. We'd never had to touch the principal. It was our rainy day fund, our security. And then, after the cancer took her, it became just my fund, my secret, quiet safety net that meant it'd never be a burden. It was all sitting there, in a few old, stodgy accounts. The kind of accounts that ask for your mother's maiden name to let you in. The pieces clicked together with an almost audible snap. The sudden interest, the specific, security question nature of his inquiries, the furtive phone tapping. My grandson wasn't here for my stories. He was here to pick the lock on my life savings. The anger came first. A hot, red wave of it that made my hands tremble on the arms of the rocking chair. After everything, after the Christmases, the birthdays, the college fund we'd helped with, the car we'd bought him when he turned 16. After all the love, it was a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. I wanted to stand up, to yell, to demand to see his phone, to call his mother, my daughter, and tell her what a viper shed raised. But I didn't. I kept rocking. The old chair creaked a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the frantic beating of my own heart. Because right on the heels of the anger came a colder, more calculating feeling, a deep, ancient sort of cunning. He thought I was a forgetful old man, a dinosaur, stumbling towards the tar pit, my brains already addled by age. He saw easy mark. Well, boy, I thought, a grim smile touching my lips that I hid behind my glass of tea. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I wasn't always Harry the Grandpa. I was Harry, who served in signals intelligence, listening to crackling radio traffic and piecing together patterns from chaos. I was Harry, who worked for 40 years as a senior auditor for the state, finding the one crook number in a forest of ledgers. I found discrepancies for a living. I built traps out of paperwork and watched arrogant, clever men walk right into them. I was a hunter of a very specific, very stupid breed of prey, the kind that thought it was smarter than the system. And my own grandson had just become my mark. The next day, I put my plan into action. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the trash goes out on Tuesday, and the metallic rumble of the truck was my alarm clock. I made my usual breakfast, 2 scrambled eggs, 1 piece of toast, black coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. But my mind wasn't on the food. It was constructing a maze, a beautiful, intricate maze with only one exit, and it led straight to a cliff. Jamie arrived just after noon, carrying a bag of sub-sandwiches. Thought I'd save you from cooking, Gramps, he said, his voice a little too bright. Appreciate it, Jamie, I said, my voice a gravelly rumble. I made a show of being slower than usual, fumbling with the paper bag. These old fingers don't work like they used to. He watched me, a flicker of impatience in his eyes before he masked it with concern. Here, let me get that. He efficiently unpacked the food, and we sat at the Formica table in the kitchen, the same table where he'd helped him with his multiplication tables. He made small talk for a while. His job, he was between things, always between things, his friends, some new video game. I nodded along, chewing my turkey sub, waiting for the pivot. It came, right on schedule. So, Gramps, all that talk about family history got me thinking, he said, wiping his mouth. I was trying to remember what was the name of that bank you and Nana Clara always used. The one with the big marble columns downtown. You told me a story about it once. Another lie? It never mentioned any bank. I took a long drink of water, buying time. This was the bait. I had to make it good. I squinted, feigning a struggle with my memory. The columns, oh, yes. First Federal Trust. Closed down. Must be 20 years ago now. Bought out by Midwestern Heritage. I let a note of nostalgic sadness into my voice. Clara loved that bank, said the marble felt solid. Permanent. His eyes lit up. He was trying to hide it, but it was there, the gleam of a prospector who's just seen a flash of gold. First Federal Trust was a real bank. It had indeed been bought out by Midwestern Heritage. A simple check would confirm it, lending credibility to everything else I was about to say. Midwestern Heritage, he repeated, committing it to memory. Yeah, that sounds right. And you still have accounts there. I waved a dismissive hand. Oh, Lord, no. When they got bought out, all the account numbers changed. It was a whole mess. Moved everything over to my new place soon after. Wanted something more modern. I leaned forward conspiratorially. Though between you and me, I never really trusted the new folks. Felt like my money was just a number in a computer somewhere. Not like the old days. He nodded sympathetically. I get that. So where'd you move it to? The question was casual, but the air in the room was taut. I leaned back again, scratching my chin as if trying to recall. Well, let's see, I tried a few places. There was that one online bank. What was it called? Global Secure Savings or something like that. Hated it. Could never get a human on the phone. I was laying the groundwork. Global Secure Savings did not exist. He'd waste time looking for it, finding nothing, which would make the next piece of information seem all the more valuable. Finally, I said, as if landing on the memory, I settled on a good, local credit union. Founders Trust, over on Maple Avenue. Small place. The manager, fella named Ben. He knows me by name. Remembers Clara. That's where it all is now. Founders Trust was real. It was a small, brick building that did indeed look reassuringly solid. Ben was also real, a nice young man who had helped me set up a new savings account a year ago. The one I used for my pension and social security deposits. The account that usually held about $3,000. My main wealth, the fruit of a lifetime of work, was elsewhere, in an entirely different institution, with layers of security Jamie couldn't even imagine. But he didn't know that. He now believed the entirety of my fortune was sitting in a small, vulnerable credit union under the name of a manager who would, presumably, be easy to socially engineer. Founders Trust on Maple, Jamie repeated, a mantra of theft. That's great, Gramps. It's good to have people who know you. It is, I agreed, my face a mask of grandfatherly simplicity. It sure is. The hook was set. Now I had to start reeling him in, giving him line, making him think the fight was all his. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a fountain of carefully constructed misinformation. I'd leave clues lying around. I accidentally left a fake statement from Founders Trust on the kitchen table, showing a healthy, but not suspiciously enormous balance of $218,476.33. It made it on my old computer, using a spreadsheet program. It wasn't a perfect forgery, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to look convincing to a greedy kid in a hurry. I made sure the account number on it was off by 2 digits. I'd wait until I heard his car pull into the driveway. Then I'd be on the phone, having a loud, slightly confused conversation with Ben from the credit union. Yes, Ben, I understand the multi-factor authentication, yes. The text message code, no. I don't have a cell phone. That's a problem, isn't it? Well, can't we just use my mother's maiden name? Oh, that's right. We set that up, yes. Security is important. He'd hang up and complain to Jamie about how complicated everything was these days. He'd drink it all in, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. He was learning the security protocols. He was learning the bypass. He was learning everything I wanted him to learn. The masterpiece, however, was the safe. I have an old Sentry safe bolted to the floor in my basement study. It's where I keep important documents, the deed to the house, my will, Clara's life insurance paperwork, my passport, and, crucially, it's where I used to keep a list of my account numbers and passwords, back before I knew better. I'd long since destroyed that list, committing everything to memory and other skill from the old days. One afternoon, I called Jamie, letting my voice quaver with a little more age than usual. Jamie, it's your grandfather. I'm in a bit of a bind. I can't, for the life of me, remember the combination to the safe. I need to get my tax documents out for the accountant. You've always been good with numbers. Do you think you could come over and help me try to figure it out? He was at my door in 20 minutes, barely containing his excitement. This was the jackpot, the mother lode. I led him down to the basement, to the small, wood-paneled room that smelled of old paper and oil from the furnace. The safe sat in the corner, green and imposing. I've tried everything I can think of, I said, wringing my hands slightly. Clara's birthday, my birthday, our anniversary, nothing. Don't worry, Gramps, we'll get it, he said, his voice oozing confidence. He knelt before the safe, his fingers hovering over the dial. I watched him, my heart a cold stone in my chest. This was the point of no return. I was about to gift wrap the keys to my kingdom for him, but they were keys to a kingdom that didn't exist. You know, I said, musing aloud. I think I might have written it down. My memory's not what it was. I think I hid it somewhere, in case I forgot. He stopped, looking back at me, his expression a perfect blend of avarice and feigned helpfulness. Where would you have put it, Gramps? Somewhere you'd remember. I paced the small room, tapping my forehead. Let me think. I used to have a little black book. No, that's gone. Wait. I snapped my fingers. The Hemingway. On a high shelf was a row of old, leather-bound books I never read. Among them was a tattered copy of For Whom the Bell Tolls. Clara always said I was like that character, Robert Jordan, too stubborn for my own good, I said, a real pang of grief lancing through the performance. I think I slipped the paper in there. Jamie practically leapt to the shelf, pulling down the book. He handled it with a reverence it didn't deserve, carefully fanning the pages. And there, tucked near the end, was a small, yellowed slip of paper. He'd planted it the night before. His hands were trembling as he unfolded it. On it, in my careful, old-fashioned cursive, was written a series of numbers: 38 minus 24 minus 36. Right, left, right. That's it, I crowed, clapping him on the shoulder. You're a genius, Jamie. I'd have never found it. He didn't smile. His entire being was focused on the safe. He moved back to it, his movements precise. He dialed the numbers. 38, right. 24, left. 36, right. He gripped the handle and pulled. With a heavy, satisfying clunk, the bolts retracted, and the door swung open. He stared into the dark interior, and I saw his breath catch. This was it, the treasure chest. I peered over his shoulder, as if curious. Inside were the folders he'd mentioned, along with a few other trinkets. Clara's wedding ring in a small box, my old military commendations, and there, sitting right on top, was another piece of paper. This one looked even more official. It was a mock-up of a secure access information form for a Founders Trust Credit Union. It had the logo, it had my name, and it had, listed in clear print, primary security question, mother's maiden name, answer, O'Sullivan, Maeve's secondary security question, city of birth, answer, Schenectady, I was born in Albany, tertiary security question, name of first pet, answer, Rex. This one was actually true. A little truth makes the lie breathe. And at the bottom, in bold letters, in the event of forgotten password, present government issued it, and this security information at any branch for verification and reset. It was a masterpiece of misdirection. It was a roadmap to fraud, and I had just handed it to him. Jamie tried to act casual. He helped me pull out the tax folder, his eyes constantly darting back to that beautiful, damning piece of paper. Well, thanks for your help, Jamie, I said, taking the folder. I don't know what I'd do without you. Anytime, Gramps, he said, his voice slightly strangled. He made a show of putting the book back on the shelf. He did not, I noted, put the little yellow slip of paper back inside it. He folded it and slipped it into his pocket. A souvenir, a key. He left soon after, claiming he had plans. I stood at the living room window and watched his car tear down the driveway, kicking up gravel. He couldn't get away fast enough. The house was silent again. The storm had left. For now. I walked back down to the basement, to the open safe. I reached in and took out the fake Founders Trust document. I looked at it for a long moment, at the careful lies I had constructed. Then I walked over to the old pot-bellied furnace that hadn't been used in years. I opened the iron door and placed the paper inside. I took a match from my pocket, struck it on the side of the furnace, and dropped it in. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished into flame. The only copy was now in Jamie's pocket. The trap was set. The maze was built. All that was left was to wait for the mouse to take the cheese. The next few days were agony. The waiting, the not knowing. I went about my routine: the grocery store, the library, my weekly phone call with my daughter, Jamie's mother. I wanted to scream down the phone, "Your son is a thief," but I didn't. This was between him and me now. I thought about Clara a lot. What would she think? She'd be horrified at first, heartbroken. But then, I like to think, a slow smile would spread across her face. She knew me. She knew the cogs that turned in my head. She'd see the elegance of it. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about education. A very, very hard lesson. On the fourth day, the phone rang. It was Ben, the real manager from Founders Trust Credit Union. Mr. Evans. Hi, it's Ben from Founders Trust. My grip tightened on the receiver. Ben, what can I do for you? I just had a very strange visit from your grandson, Jamie. Here it was. The moment of truth. I made my voice sound old and worried. Jamie, is everything all right? Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, Ben said, his tone carefully neutral. He came in today, saying he was here on your behalf. He said you were having trouble with your online access and had sent him with your security information to reset everything. He had your driver's license and a social security card. Clever boy. Head rummaged through my desk upstairs and found the copies I kept. He was thorough. I'll give him that. He did. I injected a healthy dose of confusion into my voice. My license. I haven't seen that in a few days. I thought he'd misplaced it. I certainly didn't send Jamie. What did he want? He wanted full access to your accounts, sir, Ben said. He had all the answers to your security questions. Mother's maiden name, city of birth, first pet. But that's impossible, I stammered. Well, except for the dog. Rex was his name. But my mother was Maeve Brennan, not O'Sullivan. And I was born in Albany, not Schenectady. The boy's confused. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Ben's internal alarms going off. A young man, with an elderly manzid, trying to access accounts, using blatantly incorrect information. It screamed fraud. Mr. Evans, Ben said, his voice now low and serious. This is a very serious situation. What he presented was, well, it was provably false. We have your real information on file, of course. This constitutes attempted fraud. We've actually already detained him. We've called the police. I let out a gasp, a perfect mixture of shock and distress. The police. Oh dear God. Ben, please don't let them be too hard on him. He's a good boy. He's lost. He must be in some kind of trouble. The police will sort it out, sir, Ben said, his voice kind but firm. We take these things very seriously. We'll need you to come down to the branch to confirm your identity and secure your accounts. And you'll need to file a report about your missing it. Of course, I said, my voice shaking with a performance that was starting to feel a little too real. It'll be right down. I hung up the phone. The living room was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes dancing in the air. It was over. The first part, anyway. One didn't move immediately. I sat in my armchair. The one Clara always said was my plotting chair. I thought about Jamie, sitting in a small, windowless room at the credit union, waiting for the police. The shock and terror he must be feeling. The utter confusion as to how his perfectly laid plan had exploded in his face. Had followed the map exactly, and it had led him right off a cliff. A part of me, the grandfather part, ached for him, wanted to go down there and fix it, to tell them it was all a misunderstanding, to bring my boy home. But the bigger part, the older part, the auditor, the soldier, the man who had built a life on principle and careful order, that part remained steadfast. He had chosen this path. He had looked at his own grandfather and seen a victim, a resource to be exploited. He needed to learn that actions have consequences. That trust, once broken, can't be easily glued back together. That trying to steal from an old wolf, even a sleepy one, will get you bitten. I stood up slowly, my bones complaining. I went to the hallway closet and took out my jacket. I had to go down to the credit union. I had to face my grandson and the consequences of the trap he'd so carefully laid. It was a sad business, but it was necessary. As I opened the front door, stepping out into the bright, clear day, I couldn't help the thought that flickered through my mind, a thought Clara would have appreciated. The kid had good instincts, had identified the target, done his reconnaissance, and planned his approach. He had the makings of a fine auditor. He just forgot to check his sources. The drive to Founders Trust felt longer than the 5 minutes it actually took. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my insides were a churning mess of conflicting emotions. There was a cold, grim satisfaction, the feeling of a job well done, a problem identified, and a trap successfully sprung. But layered over that was a profound and aching sadness. This was my boy, my daughter's son. It changed his diapers, pushed him on a swing, taught him how to cast a fishing line without snapping it. The memory of his small, sticky hand in mine as we walked to the park was so vivid, it was a physical pain. Now I was driving to see him in police custody. Because of me, I pulled into the credit union's parking lot. There were 2 cop cars, lights off, parked near the entrance. The sight of them made it all terrifyingly real. This wasn't a game anymore. The consequences were here, and they wore uniforms and carried handcuffs. I took a deep breath, the kind that's supposed to steady you, but doesn't really. I got out of the car, my old knees protesting, and walked slowly towards the glass doors. Inside, the normal, hushed atmosphere of a bank was gone. It was tense, electric. The few customers were being discreetly helped by tellers who kept glancing towards the manager's office in the back. A young woman with a pinched, nervous face saw me and immediately came over. "Mr. Evans, Ben is expecting you. Right this way." She led me past the marble counters and the rows of forward desks to Ben's office. The door was open. Ben, a man in his 40s with a kind face that was currently etched with severe concern, stood up as I entered, and there, in 2 chairs facing the desk, were Jamie and a police officer. Jamie looked destroyed. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed and wide with a kind of animal terror. He was slouched in the chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just stared at the floor, his hands clenched together in his lap, so tightly his knuckles were white. The second chair held a uniformed officer, a big guy with a calm, professional demeanor, writing in a small notebook. "Mr. Evans," Ben said, coming around the desk to shake my hand. His grip was firm. "Thank you for coming down so quickly." "Ben," I said, my voice rough. I let my eyes wander to Jamie, pouring on the confusion and concern. "Jamie, son, what's going on? Are you all right?" Jamie flinched at the word son, but didn't look up. A choked sob escaped him, and he pressed his lips together to stop it. The police officer stood up. "Sir, I'm Officer Miller. We've detained your grandson here on suspicion of attempted identity theft and fraud." His voice was neutral, factual. "Mr. Henderson here," he gestured to Ben, "says this young man presented identification belonging to you and attempted to gain access to your financial accounts using false information." I let my jaw drop open, a perfect picture of stunned disbelief. I staggered slightly and put a hand on Ben's desk for support. That can't be. There must be some mistake. I looked at Jamie, my voice pleading. "Jamie, tell them this is a mistake." He finally looked at me then. His eyes were a torrent of shame, fear, and a dawning, horrible confusion. He had followed the map exactly. He had the combination to the safe. He had the security answers. He had my IDs. It should have worked. The sheer wrongness of his failure was almost as terrifying to him as the police presence. Aye, he stammered, his voice a broken thing. "Gramps, you said to save the paper." I shook my head, a slow, sad movement. "The safe, Jamie. I found the combination myself this morning. It was written on the back of a photo frame upstairs. I'm so forgetful these days." "What paper?" The confusion in his eyes deepened into outright bewilderment. He was lost at sea. The lighthouse he'd been steering towards had just vanished. Ben cleared his throat. "Mr. Evans, he had answers to your security questions. He stated your mother's maiden name was O'Sullivan. We have it on file as Brennan. He said your city of birth was Schenectady. Our records show Albany." I turned to Ben, spreading my hands in a gesture of pure bafflement. "I don't understand. Why would he say that? Those are just wrong." I looked back at Jamie, and I let the hurt seep into my voice, genuine hurt that I didn't have to fake at all. Why would you say those things, Jamie? Why do you have my driver's license? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. It was the question that had no good answer. Officer Miller stepped in. Sir, we'll need you to formally confirm that you did not give him permission to access your accounts or possess your identification. I looked from the officer's steady gaze to Ben's concerned face, and finally to Jamie, who was now crying silently, tears tracking down his face. This was the moment, the point of no return. I could still stop it. I could say it was a misunderstanding, a foolish prank, that he'd given him the IDs to get something done for me and forgotten. I could save him. I saw it all in his face. The desperation, the plea. Get me out of this, Gramps. Please. I thought about the fake statement he'd left on the table, the deliberate lies I'd fed him, the planted combination, the forged document in the safe. I had built this entire situation, brick by brick, and led him to it. I had wanted him to get caught. I had wanted him to feel this exact terror, to face these exact consequences. And now that he was, the weight of it was crushing. I took a long, slow breath. I thought of Clara. What would she want? She'd want him to be safe. She'd want to protect him. But she'd also want him to be a good man. And right now, he wasn't. I made my choice. I turned to Officer Miller, my shoulders slumping not in age, but in genuine sorrow. No, officer, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I did not give him permission. I did not give him my IDs. I have no idea why he would do this. The sound that came from Jamie was a half gasp, half whimper. It was the sound of the last door slamming shut. He buried his face in his hands, his whole body shaking. Officer Miller nodded, making a note. Thank you, sir. We'll need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement. We'll also need you to sign a complaint. A complaint? I asked, feigning a little uncertainty. Is that necessary? He's just a kid. He's my grandson. I'm afraid so, sir, Officer Miller said, not unkindly. This is a serious crime. The process has to be followed. I nodded, looking down at my shoes. I see. Of course. Whatever needs to be done. The next hour was a blur of procedure and quiet humiliation. Jamie was formally placed under arrest. The words were spoken, "You have the right to remain silent," and I watched as Officer Miller gently but firmly guided him to stand, put his hands behind his back, and clicked the cold metal cuffs around his wrists. The sound was obscenely loud in the quiet office. Jamie was sobbing now, utterly broken. He kept muttering, "I'm sorry, Gramps, I'm so sorry," over and over again. I didn't say a word. I just watched, my face a mask of grief. Ben looked deeply uncomfortable. This was the ugly side of his job, the part the brochures never mentioned. They led him out a back way, away from the main lobby and the prying eyes of customers. I followed in my car to the police station, a nondescript brick building on the other side of town. The process there was slow and bureaucratic. I gave my statement to a detective, a weary-looking woman with intelligent eyes who took down every word. I confirmed my identity, confirmed the accounts were mine, confirmed that Jamie had no authorization. "He's been having some troubles lately," I offered, trying to inject some mitigating context. "Debts, I think. I think he was desperate." The detective just nodded, her expression unreadable. "Desperation makes people do foolish things, Mr. Evans. It doesn't make them legal." I signed the complaint. The paper felt heavy in my hand, the pen like a lead weight. I was officially accusing my grandson of a felony. "What happens now?" I asked. "He'll be processed, printed, and photographed," the detective said. "Then he'll see a judge for arraignment in the morning. Given the circumstances and his lack of a record, he'll likely be released on his own recognizance until the court date. You might want to call a lawyer. For him, I mean." I nodded numbly. "A lawyer? Of course." I left the station, feeling hollowed out, empty. The bright sunlight felt mocking. I got in my car, but didn't start it. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the cracked vinyl of the dashboard. I had done it. I had successfully caught a criminal. The auditor in me was satisfied. The case was clean, provable, shut tight. The grandfather in me was devastated. There was one more horrible task to perform. I started the car and drove to my daughter's house. Sarah lived about 20 minutes away, in a nice suburban split level. Her minivan was in the driveway, and the bicycle was lying on its side on the front lawn. A normal, happy scene. I was about to drop a bomb on it. I rang the doorbell. Sarah answered, wiping her hands on a dish towel, a smile on her face that vanished the second she saw mine. "Dad, what's wrong? Are you okay?" Her eyes scanned me for signs of injury or illness. "I'm fine, honey," I said, my voice tired. "Can I come in? We need to talk." The fear in her eyes intensified. "Is it Mom's side? Aunt Marie?" She was already thinking of medical emergencies. No, nothing like that," I said, stepping inside. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and something baking. It's Jamie, she said, leading me to the kitchen. "What about him? Did something happen? Was he in an accident?" Her mother's mind immediately leapt to the worst possible physical scenarios. Fraud and handcuffs weren't even on her radar. "Sit down, Sarah," I said gently. She did, her eyes never leaving my face. I took the seat opposite her at the kitchen table. I laid it out as simply and gently as I could. I told her Jamie had been acting strangely. I told her he'd been asking a lot of questions about my past. I told her he'd discovered my driver's license and social security card were missing. And then I told her that he'd tried to use them at the credit union to get into my accounts. She listened in utter silence, her face slowly draining of color. When I got to the part about the police, about his arrest, she made a small, choke sound and put a hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "No, Dad, that's not possible. There's a mistake. There has to be a mistake. Jamie he couldn't, I saw him." "Sarah," I said, my own voice thick. "At the police station." He admitted it. He was just so sorry. "The police station," she echoed, as if the words were in a foreign language. Then the reality of it hit her, and she shot up from her chair. "We have to go. We have to get him out. We need to call a lawyer. Why didn't you call me?" The questions came in a frantic, panicked rush. "I'm calling you now," I said, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "They said he'll see a judge in the morning. He'll probably be released then. We can get a lawyer first thing." "Probably," she cried. "My son is in a jail cell and you're talking about probably." She was pacing now, her hands running through her hair. Oh my God, Jamie. What was he thinking? She stopped and whirled on me. "How much did he take? Did he get anything?" "No," I said. And this, at least, was the absolute truth. He didn't get a cent. The manager, Ben, he knew the information Jamie gave was wrong. That's why they caught him. She collapsed back into her chair, sobbing now. Great heaving sobs of shock and despair. Wrong? What wrong information? This was the tricky part. I had to tread carefully. He gave my mother's maiden name as O'Sullivan. "It's Brennan." He said I was born in Schenectady. "It's Albany." Sarah stared at me, her tear-streaked face a mask of confusion. "But why would he get that wrong? He knows Nana Eleanor was a Brennan. We've been to Albany, seen the house you grew up in." Her analytical mind, so like my own, was trying to piece together the discrepancy. It was the one loose thread in my otherwise perfect tapestry. I shrug, a helpless, old man gesture. "I don't know, honey. I just don't know. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he had a fake set of information he was working from. Maybe he got bad information from someone else." I planted the seed of an excuse, a potential shadowy third party for her to blame. It was easier than blaming her son. It worked. Her face hardened. Someone put him up to this. One of those friends of his, that Tyler kid, always in trouble. Or maybe it's an online thing. A scammer who got to him. She latched onto the idea. A life raft in a stormy sea. It was easier to believe her son was a dupe than a mastermind. "Maybe," I said, non-committally. The rest of the evening was a whirlwind of phone calls. Sarah called her husband, Mark, who came home from work immediately, his face ashen. They called a family lawyer, a friend named David, who promised to be at the arraignment first thing in the morning. They called the police station for an update and were given the same information I had. Through it all, I sat on their sofa, a silent, grieving monument. They were too wrapped up in their own panic to question my story too deeply. My role was the victim, the bewildered patriarch, and I played it to perfection. I went home that night to my empty, silent house. It had never felt quieter. The absence of Clara was a physical presence. I could have used her counsel, her steadying hand. I poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass of real one, not the fake stuff, and sat in my plotting chair. The first phase was over. The trap had been sprung. Now began the second, more complicated phase, the aftermath, the legal proceedings, the family fallout, and, hopefully, the redemption. The next morning, we all went to the county courthouse. It was a grim, imposing building of grey stone. Sarah and Mark looked like they hadn't slept. He'd dressed in my best suit, the one I wore to funerals and weddings, wanting to project dignity and seriousness. We met lawyer David in the hallway. He was a sharp man in his 50s with a reassuringly confident handshake. "Don't worry," he said. "This is a first offense. The doe isn't looking to throw the book at a kid with no record. We'll plead not guilty today, get him released, and then we'll talk about a plea deal. Probably community service, restitution, maybe some counseling. The goal is to keep him out of jail and get this expunged from his record eventually." Sarah nodded, clinging to his every word like a gospel. We filed into the courtroom. It was exactly like you see on TV, all dark wood and solemnity. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then a side door opened, and a sheriff's deputy brought Jamie in. He was wearing the clothes he'd been arrested in, now wrinkled and shabby. He was clean-shaven, but pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. When he saw us, his eyes flickered with a mixture of shame and a desperate hope. His gaze lingered on me for a second, and I saw the unasked question there. Why? The arraignment was quick and brutal. The charges were read: criminal attempt, identity theft, and unlawful possession of personal identification information. Felonies. Each word was a hammer blow. Jamie stood there, head bowed, as his lawyer entered the plea of not guilty. The judge, a stern-looking woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, set a date for a preliminary hearing and, as predicted, released Jamie on his own recognizance. It was over in minutes. We met him outside the courtroom. Sarah rushed to him and enveloped him in a crushing hug, sobbing. Mark clapped him on the shoulder, his face grim. Jamie stood there, stiff, accepting their comfort, but not returning it. His eyes were on me. "Gramps," he mumbled. I don't know what to say." "We'll talk about it at home, Jamie," Sarah said, pulling away and wiping her eyes. "Let's just get you home." The ride back to Sarah's was silent. The air in the car was thick with things unsaid. Once inside, Sarah made coffee, the universal solvent for crisis. We sat around the kitchen table, the scene of so many happy family meals, now a war council. "Okay," lawyer David said, opening his briefcase. "Let's talk strategy. The evidence is pretty straightforward, Jamie. They have you on camera at the credit union. They have the fake security answers. They have your grandfather's IDs on your person. And they have your grandfather's statement." He looked at me apologetically. "No offense, Harry. None taken," I said quietly. "So, a not guilty plea is just a formality at this stage," David continued. "The goal is to negotiate the best deal possible. We need to show the DA that this is an aberration, that you're remorseful, that you have a supportive family, that you're taking steps to address whatever issues led to this." Everyone looked at Jamie. It was his turn to talk. He was staring at his hands, clenched on the table. "I was stupid," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to all of you." He looked at his parents, then finally at me. His eyes were pleading. "I was in trouble. I owe money. A lot of money. To some not very nice people." Sarah gasped. "What kind of money?" "Gambling. Online," he said, which was a half-truth I knew he'd use. "Just stupid." I panicked. I thought he trailed off, shaking his head. He couldn't say it. He couldn't say, "I thought I could steal from my grandfather." You thought you could fix one stupid mistake with an even bigger one, Mark said, his voice tight with anger and disappointment. Jamie just nodded, miserably. The not very nice people angle might help, David mused. Might make the Darcy you as more of a victim. But we need proof. Texts, emails, something. I deleted it all, Jamie said. Of course he had. Because it didn't exist. We'll work with what we have, David said. The most important thing is full, complete remorse. You need to write a statement for the court. And you need to make restitution. Restitution? Sarah asked. But he didn't take any money. The court still considers the attempt a loss of sorts, David explained. There are legal fees. The cost of the state's time. It's symbolic, but important. Usually, it's a fine. A few $1,000s. Sarah and Mark exchanged a look. They weren't poor, but a few $1,000s was a hit. He'll pay it. The words came out of my mouth before it even fully formed the thought. Everyone turned to look at me. Dad, no, Sarah said. You're the victim. You shouldn't have to pay a dime. Hayes my grandson, I said, my voice firm. And Hayes made a terrible mistake. The punishment should be the record, the community service, the shame, not a financial burden on his parents, or on him, which would just put him right back in the hole he tried to dig himself out of. I looked at Jamie. But the money comes with a condition. Jamie looked at me. Wary. What condition? You work it off, I said. You come to my house. Every day. You'll do whatever I tell you to do. Painting, cleaning the gutters, sorting through the basement, repairing the fence. Hard, physical work. For as long as it takes to work off the amount of the fine. And you'll do it with me. No headphones. No phone. Just you, me, and the work. It was a perfect punishment. It was restitution. It was practical. God knows I had a honey-do list a mile long. And most importantly, it would give me time. Time with him. Time to talk. Time to find out who this stranger was who wore my grandson's face. Time to see if there was anything of the boy I loved left to salvage. Sarah and Mark were silent, considering it. It was harsh, but it was fair. It was fatherly. It was exactly the kind of old-school, tough love solution they would expect from me. Jamie looked horrified. A summer of hard labor with his angry, victimized grandfather sounded like a special kind of hell. But what choice did he have? Okay, he whispered. His voice choked. Okay, Gramps, he'll do it. Good, I said, nodding slowly. We start Monday. The following Monday, Jamie showed up at my house at 9 a.m., just as ordered. He looked like he was walking to the gallows. He was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. I was waiting for him on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee steaming in the cool morning air. I handed one to him. Here, fuel. He took it, surprised. Thanks, we're starting with the garage, I said, not giving him time to think. It's a disaster. Has been since your grandmother died. Everything needs to be sorted. Keep, donate, trash. Your job is to do what I say. The garage was a time capsule of a life. Boxes of old Christmas decorations, tools I hadn't used in decades, camping gear from when the kids were young, piles of old National Geographic magazines Clara couldn't bear to throw out. It was a monumental task. We worked in silence for the first hour. The only sounds were the scraping of boxes, the rustle of paper, the thud of something heavy being moved. The air was thick with dust and unspoken words. I watched him. He worked with a sullen, grudging energy. But he worked. He didn't complain. He just lifted and carried and sorted. Around 11, I decided it was time to break the silence. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to lecture. The police and the courts had done that. I was going for something else. I held up a small, hand-painted flower pot. Your grandmother made this, I said, not looking at him. She was terrible at it. See how lopsided it is. But she was so proud of it. We kept geraniums in it on the back porch for 20 years. Jamie stopped what he was doing and looked at the pot. He didn't say anything. I put it gently in the keep pile. She loved you something fierce. You know, I said, my voice soft. When you were born, she held you for an hour straight, just rocking and singing. Said you had my eyes. I saw him swallow hard. He turned away, pretending to be very interested in a box of rusty tools. "She'd be heartbroken by this, Jamie," I said, the words hanging in the dusty air. "Not because of the money. She wouldn't have cared about the money. But because of the betrayal. Because you thought the answer to your problems was to steal from your family." He flinched but remained silent. "Why, Jamie?" I asked, finally turning to look at him. "Really, why? Was it just the money? Or was it something else?" He kept his back to me for a long time. I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then his shoulders slumped, and he spoke to the wall. "It was the money," he said, his voice flat. "I told you. I was in debt." "To who?" "Just people online." "Bullshit," I said, calmly. He turned around, surprised by the curse. "What? I may be old, but I'm not senile," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "You're a smart kid. You don't get into debt to people online without a trail. You don't try to steal $250,000 because of a few gambling losses. That's a flee the country amount of money. So, I'll ask you again. What was it really?" The direct challenge broke through his sullen facade. The carefully constructed story of the desperate debtor began to crack. He looked trapped. The police and his lawyer had accepted the online gambling story. I was the first one to call him on it. He looked down at his feet. "There's a girl," he mumbled. "A girl," I repeated. Now we were getting somewhere. "Her name's Chloe. I met her online. She's amazing." He said it with a kind of wistful longing that was both pathetic and deeply sad. "She lives in the city. We've been talking 4 months. She's beautiful, smart, funny. She gets me. I had a very bad feeling about this. Go on. She was going to come out here to meet me, but she needed help. She was in a bad situation. An ex-boyfriend. He was abusive, controlling, had maxed out her credit cards, ruined her credit. She was trying to get away, to start over, but she needed money for a deposit on an apartment, for a lawyer." He was talking faster now, the words tumbling out. It was a story he'd told himself so many times he almost believed it. "And you offered to help," I said, my voice neutral. "I wanted to help her," he said, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I don't have any money. My job sucks. I live with roommates. I couldn't help her." Then I thought the defiance faded, replaced by shame. "I thought of you, and the stories you always told about you and Nana. How you built this life together. I thought it's just sitting there. You never spend it. You wouldn't even miss it. I could pay it back. Once I got on my feet, I could help her. And then we could be together. And it'd make it right. It was just a loan. A temporary loan." I listened to this pathetic, romantic fantasy in silence. It was so much worse than simple greed. Had convinced himself he was a knight in shining armor, rescuing a damsel in distress with stolen gold. He wasn't a thief, he was a hero in his own mind. The sheer, stupid naivete of it took my breath away. "This Chloe," I said slowly. "Have you ever video chatted with her?" "She's shy," he said quickly. "She doesn't like being on camera. But I've seen pictures, lots of pictures. Have you ever spoken to her on the phone? A real, live conversation. We text. All the time. Every day." He said it as if it were proof. A cold certainty settled in my gut. My grandson, the would-be identity thief, had himself been catfished. He hadn't been trying to steal from me to pay off gambling debts or loan sharks. Had been trying to steal from me to send money to a scammer who'd spun him a beautiful lie. The irony was so bitter, I almost laughed. Had become a criminal to fund his own victimization. I didn't tell him my suspicion. Not yet. It would have shattered him. And a shattered man can't do hard labor. He needed to cling to the fantasy of Chloe for a little while longer, to make the punishment bearable. Instead, I just nodded, as if considering his tragic romance. "That's a heavy burden to carry alone, son." The unexpected empathy disarmed him. His eyes welled up. "I just wanted to do the right thing. FOR once. I wanted to be the hero." "I know," I said softly. "But son, a real hero doesn't rob his family to save a stranger. A real hero faces his problems head on, even when it's hard, even when there's no easy way out." I picked up a crowbar and handed it to him. Now, be a hero and pry open that crate. I think your grandmother's old china is in there, and we need to see if the mice have gotten to it. The physical work became our language. For the next week, we labored in the garage, then moved on to the backyard, tearing out old, overgrown shrubs. We didn't talk about the case much. We didn't talk about Chloe. We talked about mindless things. The weather, the best way to sharpen a lawnmower blade, the stupid plot of a movie head scene. A routine developed. He'd show up. We'd work. It'd make us lunch-thick sandwiches and more iced tea. We'd eat in silence on the porch. Then we'd work some more. The sullenness began to fade, replaced by a kind of weary resignation. The work was hard, and his soft, city hands blistered and calloused. But he kept showing up, every day. One afternoon, we were wrestling a particularly stubborn stump out of the ground. We were both sweating, covered in dirt, grunting with effort. Finally, with a loud crack, the roots gave way and the stump came free. We both stumbled backward, landing on our butts in the grass. For a second, we just sat there, panting. And then, Jamie laughed. It was a short, surprised sound, utterly devoid of malice or anxiety. It was just a laugh of pure, physical exhaustion and minor victory. I looked at him, and I laughed too. It was the first real, unscripted moment we'd shared in months. He looked at me, his face smudged with dirt, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, and he smiled. A real smile. It was tired, but it reached his eyes. Haven't worked that hard ever, he gasped. Builds character. I grunted, getting to my feet and offering him a hand. He took it, and I pulled him up. For a brief moment, it was just a grandfather and his grandson, working together. The fraud, the arrest, the lawyers, it all receded, leaving behind the simple, honest fatigue of a job well done. It was a start. A tiny, fragile crack in the wall he'd built around himself. The real work, the work of figuring out who Jamie was without the lies, without the desperate need to be a hero, was just beginning. And as we stood there in the ruined garden, catching our breath, I knew the hardest part was still to come, showing him that the damsel he wanted to rescue was actually the dragon. The laughter in the backyard, the shared moment of exhaustion and minor victory, was a truce. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a cessation of hostilities. The wall between us was still there, but it had a crack in it, and a little light was getting through. The work continued. We moved from the ravaged garden to the porch. The old swing, the one Clara had loved, was sagging badly, one chain link stretched and threatening to snap. I pointed at it. That's next. Jamie eyed it. Looks like a death trap. It's been a death trap for 20 years, I said. Your grandmother never minded. Said it added excitement. I gestured to the toolbox. We'll need to take it down, replace the chains, probably reinforce the frame. It's a two-man job. It was more than that. It was a metaphor. Something broken, something cherished, needing care and 2 pairs of hands to fix. As we gathered tools, the rhythm of the work took over again. The easy silence of the previous day was gone, however. The conversation we'd had about Chloe hung in the air between us, a spectre at the feast. He'd confessed his grand, tragic motivation, and he'd accepted it. I hadn't condemned it. I think that unnerved him more than any anger would have. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped around mid-morning, but not in the way he expected. My phone rang. I wiped my greasy hands on a rag and fished it out of my pocket. It was Lawyer David. I put it on speakerphone, a calculated risk. Jamie needed to be part of this. Harry. David here. I've got an update. Morning, David. I've got you on speaker. Jamie's here with me. I saw Jamie freeze, a wrench in his hand, his eyes wide with instant anxiety. Oh, okay. Hi, Jamie. David's voice was professional, neutral. I just got off the phone with the DAS office. They've reviewed the case. They're willing to deal. Jamie let out a breath he'd been holding. They're offering a diversion program. David continued. If Jamie pleads guilty to a lesser charge, misdemeanor attempted fraud, and completes the terms, the charge will be dismissed and eventually expunged. It will be like it never happened. What are the terms? I asked, though I could guess. 200 hours of community service, mandatory financial counseling, and restitution of, let's see, they've set it at $3,500. I looked at Jamie. His face had fallen. $3,500. To a kid with no job and massive, if fictional, debts. It might as well have been $3 million. I see, I said. And the timeline? He'd have a year to complete the service and pay the restitution. I don't have $3,500, Jamie whispered, his voice tight with a fresh wave of panic. The reality of the hole he was in was becoming terrifyingly concrete. Well, figure it out, son, I said, my voice calm. David, what about the other thing we discussed? The mitigating circumstances. I presented the narrative of the online pressures, the potential coercion from third parties, David said. The Dar was skeptical, without evidence, but it may have helped soften them up for the diversion offer. Without it, they were pushing for a felony plea. Jamie looked at me, confused. I had never discussed online pressures or third parties with him. I just planted the idea with David, who had run with it, building a defense around the story Jamie had told me. Thank you, David, I said. We'll discuss it and get back to you. We hung up. The silence on the porch was heavy. The swing creaked in the light breeze. Third parties, Jamie finally asked. I told David, you were under pressure from some bad people online, I said, picking up a screwdriver and examining it. It seemed to help, but I told you. It was just he trailed off. The lie about the gambling debts dying on his lips. Had already replaced it with the Chloe story. I know what you told me, I said, my voice even. But I did it for a girl doesn't play as well in a courtroom, who was being threatened by shadowy internet loan sharks. Makes you look less like a fool and more like a victim. Lawyers prefer victims. Juries, too. The word fool hung in the air. It was the first truly harsh thing he'd said to him since the arrest. He flinched. It's not like that, isn't it? I put the screwdriver down and turned to face him fully. Jamie, you tried to ruin your life and mine for someone you've never met. You've never heard her voice. You have no proof she even exists outside of a few pictures on a screen. Does that sound like the action of a shrewd man or a fool? His face flushed. You don't understand. What we have is real. It's deeper than just pictures and voices. I'm sure it is, I said. And the flatness of my tone was more devastating than any sarcasm could have been. Love letters typed on a keyboard are a powerful thing. Now, about that $3,500. The change of subject was brutal, but necessary. We had to deal with the practicalities. The fantasy could wait. He'll get a job, he said immediately, though he sounded defeated. He'll work nights. He'll pay it back. The terms are a year, I said. The work you're doing here counts toward your restitution, remember. We agreed. But at minimum wage, that's a lot of hours. We're going to be fixing this swing for a decade. He managed a weak smile. So what do? We don't do anything, I said. You are going to do something. You're going to sell something. He looked around the dusty porch, at the old tools. Sell what? Not my things. Your things. I leaned against the porch rail. That gaming computer of yours. The fancy headphones. The console. The watch your parents gave you for graduation. It's all top of the line. Barely used, isn't it? His mouth dropped open. My setup. But that's everything I have. No, I said, my voice hardening for the first time. It's not. You have your freedom. You have a chance to keep a felony off your record. That is what you have. Those things. I waved a dismissive hand. They're toys. They're the distractions that kept you from building a real life. That left you so lonely and adrift that the first pretty picture that paid you attention could convince you to become a criminal. They have to go. It was a brutal calculus, but it was just. It was the principle of the thing. Restitution wasn't supposed to be easy. It was supposed to cost you something. Tears welled in his eyes again. But this time they were tears of anger and loss. That's not fair. Fair. I barked a short, harsh laugh. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to try to clean out my life savings? Was it fair to put your mother through hell? Was it fair to make me stand in a police station and point a finger at my own flesh and blood? Don't you ever talk to me about fair, James. You lost that right. The use of his full name hit him like a slap. He looked away, shamed into silence. You will make a list, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. You will research the prices. You will sell it all on one of those online marketplaces you're so fond of. And you will bring me the money. Every cent. Is that understood? He gave a tiny, jerky nod. Good. Now, let's get this swing down before it falls down and kills one of us. The next few days were grim. Jamie worked with a quiet, sullen fury. He dismantled his prized possessions with the care of a mortician preparing a body. He took photos, wrote descriptions, and posted them online. The ding of a new message on his phone, the haggling over prices. It was a special kind of torture for him. I watched him do it, my heart aching for him even as I knew it was the only way. He was learning the cost of things, the real cost. The money started trickling in. A few hundred for the console, 1,000 for the high-end computer. The watch went for 500. He brought me the cash in envelopes, his hand trembling each time. I didn't thank him. I just took it and put it in the old cookie jar on the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet. The jar Clara used for grocery money. One afternoon, he came over empty-handed. The work was done. Everything was sold. It's all gone, he said, his voice hollow. He looked like a man who'd sold his own organs. How much? I asked. $3,270, he recited, as if he'd memorized the number. He was $230 short. I nodded, went to the cookie jar, and counted out $230 from the cash he'd already given me. I handed it back to him. What's this for? He asked, bewildered. You earned it, I said. The work you did here had value. This makes up the difference. Now you have the full amount. You will take it to Lawyer David tomorrow. You will hand it to him yourself. He stared at the money in his hand, then back at me, his confusion absolute. I had forced him to tear his world apart, and then he'd given him a piece of it back. The lesson was complex, and I could see him struggling to comprehend it. Accountability had a price, but hard work had value, even the work of atonement. The next day, he went to David's office and paid the restitution. He called me from the parking lot afterward. It's done, he said. He sounded lighter. The weight of the debt, at least the financial one, was gone. Good, I said. Now come over. The swing isn't going to fix itself. When he arrived, something was different. The sullenness was gone, replaced by a kind of weary resolve. We worked on reinforcing the porch frame, measuring and cutting wood. The silence was comfortable again. It was time. The groundwork had been laid. He was stripped bare of his possessions and his excuses. Now he was ready for the truth, or at least, as ready as he would ever be. I did some digging, I said casually, holding a board steady for him to nail. About your friend, Chloe. He froze, the hammer poised in mid-air. What? Why would you do that? Call it professional curiosity, I said. Old habits. You said her name was Chloe Dawson, right? From the city. He nodded, wary. And she's a yoga instructor, with the red hair and the green eyes. The one in the picture by the waterfall. Yeah, he said, a defensive edge in his voice. So, it's interesting, I said, pulling out my phone. It spent the last week doing more than just supervising his manual labor. It put my old skills to use. That picture by the waterfall. It's a beautiful picture. It's also the third result on a stock photo website for Happy Woman Nature. The model's name is Sasha. She's from Estonia. Jamie's face went slack. What? No. That's not possible. She sent that to me. I'm sure she did, I said gently, along with the one of her with the dog. That's a Spanish influencer's picture from 2018. The one in the coffee shop. That's from a German lifestyle blog. I scrolled through my phone, showing him the evidence I'd meticulously gathered. Reverse image searches. Forum posts about a known catfishing scam using the same photos. It was all there, laid out in the cold, hard light of a smartphone screen. He stared at the screen, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. The color drained from his face. No, you're wrong. You're just trying to mess with me. You're still angry. I am angry, I admitted. But not at you. Not anymore. I'm angry at the piece of garbage who did this to you, who played on your loneliness and your good heart to try and steal from you, who almost succeeded in making you steal from me. But the conversations he stammered, his worldview cracking apart. She knows things about me. She cares. Of course she does, I said, my voice soft but relentless. That's the game. They listen. They collect information. They tell you what you want to hear. It's a script, Jamie. You were reading lines, written by a con artist, probably sitting in a boiler room on the other side of the world. I showed him one last thing. A screenshot from a scam awareness forum. A user had posted a nearly identical story. A beautiful woman named Chloe. A desperate situation. Requests for money for an apartment deposit, for a lawyer, for a sick relative. The patterns were all the same. The only thing that changed was the amount and the victim. Jamie's legs seemed to give out. He sat down hard on the porch steps, his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He was past tears. He was in shock. The beautiful, tragic romance he'd built his crime around had just evaporated, leaving behind the ugly, cheap reality of a common scam. All of it, he whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. It was all a lie. I'm sorry, son, I said. And I truly was. It was a horrible thing to have to do. It was like telling a child, there's no Santa Claus, but 1,000 times worse, because this Santa had convinced him to commit felonies. It was all a lie. He was silent for a long, long time. I sat down next to him on the steps, not touching him, just sharing the space. The weight of his shame and humiliation was a physical thing in the air. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I am such an idiot. No, I said firmly. You're not an idiot. You were lonely. You were naive. You wanted to believe in something good. They prey on that. They're professionals. This is what they do. You were out of your depth from the very first message. I stole from my family for a ghost, he said. The full, horrifying absurdity of it dawning on him. You did. I agreed. There was no sugarcoating it now. But you also got caught. You faced the music. You're paying the price. And now you know. That's the most important part. Now you know. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes. It wasn't shame, or fear, or confusion. It was clarity. A painful, brutal, necessary clarity. You knew, he said slowly, the realization dawning. You knew all along, didn't you? That's why you the wrong answers. The fake paper in the safe. You weren't just forgetting. You were laying a trap. I held his gaze. There was no point in denying it anymore. Yes, you knew I was going to try to steal from you. I suspected. Then I knew for sure. And you let me do it. You helped me do it. The awe in his voice was mixed with a kind of horror. You fed me the rope and watched me hang myself. I gave you enough to hang yourself with. Yes, I corrected him. But I also made sure the drop wouldn't break your neck. A felony arrest that becomes a dismissed misdemeanor. That's a scare. A lesson. A real felony conviction for identity theft. That's a life sentence. I chose the lesson. He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time. Not as old Gramps, the forgetful relic, but as Harry, the strategist, the auditor, the wolf. You played me, he breathed. I taught you, I said. It was the hardest lesson I ever had to give, and the hardest one you'll ever have to learn. I hope to God you never forget it. He looked away, out over the lawn we'd reclaimed together, the garage we'd cleaned out. He saw the past few weeks not as a punishment, but as a campaign I had designed and executed with cold, brutal precision. He should have been furious. He should have felt betrayed all over again. Instead, he started to laugh. It was a dry, hollow, incredulous sound. All that time I thought I was so clever. I thought I was playing you, and you were just waiting. I was hoping I was wrong, I said quietly. Until the very end, I was hoping I was wrong. The laughter died away. He nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. The master manipulator hadn't been him, or the catfish. It had been the old man with the aching bones and the seemingly failing memory. What happens now? He asked. It was the same question it asked at the police station. Now the roles were reversed. Now, I said, standing up and offering him my hand once more. We finished the swing. Your grandmother loved this swing. It deserves to be fixed properly. And we did. We worked through the afternoon, the dynamic between us forever altered. The hierarchy had been re-established, not through age, but through cunning. He looked at me with a new respect, a wary awe. I was no longer a target. I was a mentor who had given him a graduate-level course in consequences. The legal process ground on. Jamie did his community service, picking up trash in the local parks. He went to financial counseling. He stayed with his parents, got a job at a local hardware store, and started saving money. The diversion program was successfully completed. The charge was dismissed. He still came over. Not every day, but often. We didn't always work. Sometimes we just sat on the now sturdy porch swing and talked. Real talks. About his plans. About his regrets. About his fear that he'd always be the guy who tried to rob his grandpa. You're not, I told him one evening. You're the guy who got played, who made a terrible mistake, and who faced it down. That's a man. A fool doesn't learn. A man does. The final test came about 6 months after the arraignment. He showed up at my door looking nervous, holding a thick envelope. What's this? I asked. It's for you, he said, handing it to me. I opened it. Inside was $3,500 in cash. It's the restitution, he said, from the job. I want you to have it back. I looked at the money, then at him. His face was serious, determined. This was important to him. The court got their money, Jamie. This is yours. You earned it. I earned it because you made me sell my stuff, he said. And you paid me for the work here. But the fine that was my debt, my mistake, I should be the one to pay it, not you. He took a deep breath. So in paying it, to you, I understood. This wasn't about the money. This was about closure, about squaring the account himself, on his own terms. It was about pride. I took the envelope. Thank you, Jamie. He nodded, looking relieved. The ledger was finally, truly, balanced. He started to leave, then turned back. Hey, Gramps. Yeah, son. That day at the credit union, the security answers. You gave me the wrong ones on purpose, but you gave me the right name for my first pet, Rex. That was true. Why? I smiled a little. Even the best trap needs honest bait, Jamie. A little truth makes the lie breathe. And besides, I looked out at the yard, remembering a mangy little terrier from a lifetime ago. Some things shouldn't be lied about. He smiled back, a real, genuine smile. Yeah, okay. He left. I stood in the doorway, holding the envelope of cash. It felt heavy. It wasn't money. It was redemption. I went to the kitchen, to the cookie jar. I didn't put the money inside. Instead, I took out the other $3,500, the money from his sole possessions, and the work he'd done. I put his new money in the jar. Then I took the old money and I drove to the bank. I opened a new savings account. I deposited the $3,500. I put the account information, the statement, the account number into a new envelope, and I mailed it to Jamie. There was no note. He would understand. A week later, he called me. His voice was thick with emotion. Gramps, I got this in the mail. I know, I said. Why? Because you paid your debt, I said. To the court. And to me. That's done. That money in that envelope. That's your seed money. Not for a scam. Not for a fantasy. For a life. Use it for a security deposit on an apartment. Or for trade school. Or just let it sit there until you know what you really want. That's not my money anymore. It's yours. You bought it back with your sweat and your honor. So use it wisely. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, a soft, shaky breath. I will. I promise. Thank you, Gramps. You're welcome, son. The story of Grandfather Harry and the identity theft twist didn't have a happy ending. Not in the traditional sense. There were too many scars, too much pain. But it had a good ending. An ending with understanding and respect. And the love that was tougher and more real than anything that had come before. He still comes over every Sunday for dinner. We sit on the porch swing, which doesn't sag at all anymore, and we talk. Sometimes we even talk about Chloe, not with pain, but with a kind of wry disbelief. He's dating a girl now, a real one, who goes to his community college. She's sharp, and she doesn't take any of his nonsense. I like her. The other day, he was helping me clean out the attic. He found a box of my old auditing manuals and textbooks from the 50s. He blew the dust off one and flipped through it, looking at the complex charts and diagrams. "This is what you did?" he asked, impressed. "That's what I did," I said. He shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. "No wonder I never stood a chance." I clapped him on the shoulder. "It wasn't about winning, Jamie. It was about teaching you the rules of the game, so you'd never lose like that again." He looked at me, and the awe was still there, but now it was mixed with gratitude. "I know, Gramps, I know." He put the book back in the box. Then he picked up the next one, ready to get back to work. And we did.